sister's a therapist and I tell jokes. We both want to help all kinds of folks.
Hello and welcome back to My Sister's a Therapist. My name's Virginia Jones. I'm a comedian. I'm not a therapist, but my sister is, and here she is.
My name is Laura Ryan, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist.
This podcast is about two sisters talking about mental health issues, what's happening in the zeitgeist, pop culture stuff, both coming at it from our own perspectives, what we've learned, what we used to believe and what we believe now. We're both old as S-hit, so we've picked up a few things along the way. And this week, we're going to be talking about codependency.
Yes. And here we go. So codependency. So what do you know about codependency?
I've had a lot of different thoughts on this. So codependency became, sometimes a word just becomes super trendy.
Right.
Mental health topic.
Gaslighting is the current hit.
Gaslighting, very popular. Mansplaining, on the spectrum.
Yes.
Narcissist. Once we understand a mental health concept or idea, sometimes we just spread it everywhere with a peanut butter knife, just everything.
Everything is that.
Everything is that. That explains every problem we've had in our day-to-day interactions. So in the 80s, we came up with this idea that if you were in a bad relationship where someone was asking too much of you, it was also your fault. You were codependent. You were feeding. And what it sounds like is two people who are interdependent,
right?
Which can be healthy. Right? Two people who are fulfilling each other's needs and supporting each other in a relationship. Codependency was always painted as a negative thing. And looking back, feels a little victim blamey.
Right.
But what happened to the meaning of the word, I think, is as soon as it got popular, people were everything was codependent.
Right.
And is codependent to need your partner to go with you to PTA meetings. It's codependent to every aspect of a relationship was labeled codependent. Basically, the model became having no needs.
Right. Having a need means you're codependent. I think that did kind of translate. I mean, I think it also, if we're looking at our culture at the time, it was a super independent, we don't need other people kind of way of thinking.
And so now when people say codependent, I think it has a different shade of meaning than it used to.
Right.
But definitely there was a moment where if you had any needs at all in a relationship, if you had anything you needed from another human being or another human being.
I always need a lot of things from people who are peeing.
It was codependent and unhealthy. Right. How would you define it from a therapist's perspective?
So I read an article by Helen Sereni, and she says that the term codependency was initially coined by Alcoholics Anonymous in 1950, actually, to describe individuals whose unhealthy choices enable and encourage their partner with addiction. So I think that's where the phrase first came from. Is AA, the world of AA.
Because I had never heard that, but it makes a lot of sense because also the period of 80s and 90s was definitely super into 12-step culture and trying to apply those lessons to everything. But it's also true. We've definitely known people who were struggling with addiction and whose partners were able to hold it together for them, and able to keep them from hitting bottom maybe for longer than they would have. And maybe that's not
longer than they should have. Initially, when codependency was introduced by Alcoholics Anonymous, it was thought of as a relationship addiction, right? So again, according to Helen Sereni in the article, Understanding the Origins and How to Heal from Codependency, she says codependency involves emotional, spiritual, physical, or mental enmeshment with a loved one. So I think of it as more of a relationship style than an addiction. And I think it is evident in every relationship, whether it's an alcoholic relationship or a drug addict relationship, there's always going to be codependency involved because you can't have relationships like that are healthy, where everyone has good boundaries. And you can't have a relationship that's like that exist without some codependency in it. Enmeshment. Let's get back to that. So I think of enmeshment as I don't know where you end and where I begin. We are one. So enmeshment really means that you grew up in a family system that doesn't have good boundaries. Right. How you feel about me is how I feel about myself. What is yours is mine. Well, actually, my son experiences enmeshment in this sense. What's yours is mine. And also what's mine is mine. If one family member is having problems, the whole family is having problems.
Well, and especially if the family member is the addict.
Right. But even like, as you probably noticed in our family, that when dad was struggling, we were all struggling. When mom was unhappy, we were all unhappy. We all had to take responsibility for her emotional life.
So I've already learned more about codependency than I had ever thought about. So I think the challenge is this: if you're just a regular folk walking down the street, right, codependent almost sounds good. Right. Because you're dependent on each other.
I think it's the wrong, I don't like the word. I think that it should be replaced. I really think it's called enmeshment is really what it should be called.
Yeah. Right. Enmeshment.
But in the zeitgeist, it's codependent. It's because we can thank Melody Beattie for that. She wrote Codependent No More. And
it's fine. Right.
But it really confuses people because when I say you're being codependent, people stare at me blankly, in my office. Right. Which is where I usually talk about this, but they stare at me blankly and say, well, what does that mean? So I think it should be called enmeshment.
So if we say it in like layman's terms, simple terms, codependency is when you are overstepping a normal, like a healthy boundary between two people.
When you are solving other people's problems that they themselves should be solving. So like what I tell my clients is if you were in the Bahamas and you didn't have cell service, you didn't have internet, would this thing that you're so concerned about be a problem? And most of the time it's no, because it's not my problem. I am making my child's problem or my husband's problem or someone else's problem mine. And that's not good for anybody.
This is something you'll be surprised I've struggled with in my friendships.
And your relationship.
Well, yeah. But I think relationships is where we expect to find it. But like, I will hear about, understand a challenge that one of my female friends is having. I will try to solve it. I will like barrel into it. And it feels mean to say it's not my business.
Well, and
it's not my role. Like there's a difference between.
It's not my role. It's not my role. And sometimes I experience this with you. Also, sometimes I will tell you about a problem and you immediately try to fix it for me. And that's not what I want. Because in doing that, just, let's use that as an example. Let's say that you do fix my problem for me, right? Let's say that you do call the right person or handle it all by yourself. What exactly does that teach me? One, it teaches me that, I'm not responsible for my problems. You are. And it also makes you resent me. Like I remember, again, I was married to a man. And that was a key component. When we first got married, there was all this stuff. He was international. So we had to do all of this paperwork and I had to, pay a lot of money to get him over here.
Always came down to you.
Yes. And so that became the dynamic of the relationship. So clinical psychologist Renee Exelbert classifies an adult relationship as codependent when one partner, known as the taker, needs the other partner, known as the giver, who in turn needs to be needed. So the codependent dynamic is constructed around an inequity of power that promotes the needs of the taker while leaving the giver sacrificing themselves, walking on eggshells to avoid conflict, and feeling the need to constantly apologize even when they have done nothing wrong. And that in a nutshell describes my whole marriage. I remember reading Melody Beattie's book, Codependent No More, on the beach in Mexico and thinking, oh my God, this is my whole marriage. This is my entire marriage where I am constantly caretaking a person who is an adult man.
Right. And let's pause for a second. I haven't read as much self-help as you have, but let's talk about the specific pleasure of reading a self-help book that speaks to you, because it's not 100% positive, but it's like a gross smell that you like. It's like the pleasure of taking off a Band-Aid. Like it's so...
Right. It's very validating, right? Because I was raised in a very codependent and enmeshed family. I don't know if you knew that about me.
Weird.
But, I thought handling everything for another person was just what you do. Like, for example, my husband was in graduate school and he needed a final paper to get his doctorate or get his master's degree. And he sent me a copy of it. I said, I'll just look it over. I'll edit it. And it was complete horseshit. Like, it was not publishable. It was not readable. So I basically wrote, his master's paper for him, which is not good. I think I just thought, I'm doing what I need to do in service of him moving here, and I'll do whatever I need to do to make that happen. But was he particularly grateful for my rewrite of his paper? No, he was not. And did I feel really taken advantage of? Yes. But did he ask me to even do it? No. That was something I did. I have to. I
have to do. This is horseshit. Yeah. Right. And I have to protect him from finding out how bad this fucking paper is.
Well, I thought of it more like I have to protect myself because I want to be married to a person who has, a master's degree and has a future. Right. And if he turns his paper in, it will not pass. And so I have to protect us from his ignorance or whatever. I don't know.
But this is something we talk a lot about. I think that the model for a normal marriage through our childhood was a codependent marriage.
Oh, absolutely. It definitely. I mean, if you look at both of them, right? Like my mother, needed my father to handwrite, directions to anywhere in the world that she needed to go. And vice versa. Like he needed her to make sure he bathed and washed his clothes, Did his taxes. Yep. Paid his taxes, which,
taxes, right?
As we know, he did not do of his own volition. Yeah, that was the whole dynamic of their marriage. And so that's what I thought women were supposed to do. And I also want to say, this goes both ways. Men are also codeps in relationships where women are takers. It's not gendered.
So you don't have to have, this is where it splits off from 12-step, from alcohol addiction 12-step.
Right.
You don't have to have an addict to have a codependent relationship. What you have to have is an adult person who does not feel capable or does not want to step into all of the chores that being an adult requires.
I mean, I think that's half of it. I think it's also the person who is the giver has to be raised in an environment that's boundaryless, where they're taught over and over again that I live for others and I take care of others and I don't take care of myself.
I think that my tendency personally towards codependent behavior, we call it in my office, we call it big sister energy that I give off.
Right.
But I think a lot of it comes from apologizing for myself.
Right.
Trying to make people like me.
Right.
Trying to make people like me, even though I'm fat.
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine a person liking a fat person?
I think a lot of my acts of service have come out of
over caretaking. Over
caretaking comes out of that and comes out of a desire to make myself palatable for other people. Like, it took a long time for me to understand that when I was over serving, when I was caretaking another person, it was my boundary that was bad. And not theirs.
Right. So the interesting thing about codependency, like if you're looking at it through the lens of addiction, right? Unlike other addictions, this is a relationship style that absolutely no one wants you to recover from. Like, when you're an alcoholic and you're ruining your wife's life or husband, everybody wants you to stop doing it, but no one wants you to stop being codependent because everyone benefits from it except for you.
Now, we don't know a ton, we don't know everything about our grandparents' relationships. So one thing I think we can agree on is that our grandmother, Virginia, who I'm named for, in an attempt to make her like me and my mother, didn't work.
Dramatic fail.
Failed. It's like my whole life, I'm carrying around kind of a tough name.
To appease a woman who did not even care.
To appease a woman who did not care, did not like me, and is dead. But so Virginia and William, he was super much an alcoholic active in his addiction, so much so he died in his 40s of cirrhosis. Hooray, hooray. But she definitely had a codep going with him. Like when he came home drunk, she would go out and repark his car if he
Right.
parked it in a way that looked drunk. Like her whole life was covering up for his BS.
And like bringing him alcohol when he was drying out in the hospital. Like she would,
Right.
she could have gotten herself arrested because she went in to a friend of his liquor store and bought liquor on a Sunday so that she could sneak it into the hospital so he could drink while he was supposed to be drying out.
I mean, something that ultimately did not serve her in any way.
Right.
But she thought that was what relationships were and what love is. So that's where our mother came up. Right. So she had that message. And I do agree with you. Both of our parents had real blind spots that they were not able to deal with. But I do think that they cross boundaries for each other, mostly in dad's benefit, but not in.
I think it was both. I think it went both ways. Cause like something that I noticed with mom, as I've been living next to her, I really have had a lot of empathy for dad because she does expect you to manage her entire life. The demands that she has on the people around her are so high and so unrealistic and unhealthy. And I thought if I were married to a lady who was doing this for 15 years, I would not stay.
Well, I want to remind you or ask you a question. Do you remember when we started using MapQuest, another technology conversation? You would use MapQuest to get everywhere. And it was amazing because it used to be you had to get a bunch of paper maps. You would have to go to a gas station and get a map and try to hook it up to the map that you had and figure out how to get someplace. But now you could just do it instantaneously. But my mother would call me on the phone and ask me to get her directions from one place to another in Mejia or Hubbard or some Texas town that I had never lived in, had never been to.
Right.
And I just kept saying, like, why? You can do this.
Right.
You can absolutely do this.
But also, she continued to do that when she lived here and she had GPS. Yeah. She would still call me and ask how to get home from different places. Yeah. So we've had this model for a long time. Our mother and father both expected us to take care of their emotional needs. I remember also as a teenager, dad was expecting his teenage children to handle all the domestic labor. That was really tough. Like he didn't teach us anything about how to be a person, but we were supposed to know how to do laundry and cook and clean and keep a tidy house for him, which is super weird.
Let's also be real specific. He expected the girls to do that.
Yeah.
Like Robbie didn't have any jobs or expectations, which is good because he wouldn't do anything. But yes, when my mother moved out of the house and then
Robbie was expected to do laundry, and that's why Robbie didn't use towels. He would just air dry because he didn't want to have to wash his own towels.
But yeah, so he moved out with his girlfriend, and that's like that, for me is like the reason for so much of my life being how it is, that my dad left me in charge of running a household when I was 14 or 15 years old. Anyway, but he'd been used to that overstep. Like, why would he do anything different?
Right. But I mean, I think that is how, if we're looking at the problems that have plagued us and in fact plague every person with codependency, these were messages from, the jump that we were supposed to handle things. Like I remember in 4th grade, I went to school and was just wearing crappy clothes. And I found out it was picture day because dad expected me to manage as a 4th grader, as a 9-year-old, manage the school calendar by myself.
Yeah. He didn't care if you didn't.
It's true. But
that's an important thing to write on.
So this week, my 9-year-old went to camp and he had a special bandana that they had tie-dyed the day before, and they were supposed to wear it to school or camp on Friday. I put it in his backpack, but he took it out and threw it on the couch. And then when we got to camp, he blamed me for losing it and insisted that I had to drive home. And, he was crying and all this stuff. And I felt really triggered because I remember being his age and having to be responsible for like field trip where there's a lunch. I needed to remember that, again, I feel like that's what codependency tells us. You're supposed to do more than what is correct or healthy for you. And I think the problem is a lot of times when we're raised in environments like that, we end up overcorrecting in the other direction for our kids and just being codependent. They end up being the takers and we end up being the givers. So like I have had many clients in my practice over the many years that I've been doing this who are single moms and don't understand that when, your daughter goes to college, that's when she starts to need to fend for herself. That's when she needs to manage her own grades. That's when she needs to learn how to do laundry and handle her life. But I mean, yeah, I remember I had a client who had daughters in their 20s still living at home.
That's the unspoken lesson of college, right? Like it's a bunch of classes where you get to choose your own classes, choose your own adventure, and try to mold your life and experience into something that will get you a job that you like. But the real thing, and one of the challenges of community college or commuter colleges, the real thing is that you're learning how to be a grown-up. Yeah. You're learning how to pick up after yourself and feed yourself. And it's really hard, but you have to do it.
And if you have a parent who's overcorrecting and engaging in that relationship style of enmeshment, where I don't understand that your term paper is your problem, then you end up learning that you can't handle things by yourself, that you can't manage. Like just today, I was talking to someone who was telling me how his adult daughters who are in their 30s are living with him currently, and how, one of them has purchased a house, but she just really prefers to stay at home with mom and dad because they do all her laundry and cook her meals. I said, well, can you come over and tuck me in tonight? Can you fold my clothes? Because I could use some assistance there. But yeah, I think I guess what my point that I'm trying to make is that codependency hurts everybody involved. It hurts the giver because they become resentful and angry and don't have any time to themselves. And it hurts the taker because it teaches them that they can't be competent, that they can't take care of, what they're supposed to take care of and handle life.
I also think a challenge is that women's roles and ability to do stuff has changed so much in the last 50 years. Like the big story, that you would hear about in the boomer generation and the silent generation is a husband would pass and a wife was left learning how to write a check, Right. So our roles do change and our ability to take care of ourselves encompasses different things. I had a weird codependent moment yesterday. I was talking to a friend who frequently engages my big sister energy.
Right.
And she and I we agreed we were going to go to this open mic together. And we had very different opinions about when to leave for it.
Right.
So I was like, here's what it is. It starts at 5. I've been there at 4:30 and you don't do anything but stand around in the heat. I would like to get there at 5. And so I would like to leave at 4:30. And she said, I hear that, but I want to leave at 4 because I want to be sure. Because traffic is a question mark.
You live in LA.
Right. But it isn't. I do this all the time. And I got really irrationally agitated about it.
Right.
Because I do this all the time. And I know that if I leave at 4:30, I will get there at 5. I do it. It's always the same day. It's always the same time. I know it's doable.
Right.
And then she bogged on me 30 minutes before I left, which is fine, normal. But even I drove myself. I left when I wanted to.
Right.
I got there and I was still upset. And I was talking to another woman. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm still in my head about
the stupid argument. This absolutely pointless argument.
Has no point. I had weird ideas. I'm like, and this is just about me needing to be right all the time. Also, I'm like, right. I'm going to text her a picture of the map where I am and the time that it is.
Because what you're trying to do is fix her. And I cannot fix. That has been a really important. Actually, my marriage taught me that. I cannot fix other people. And so codependency is a trauma response to the stress that a child is exposed to growing up in a dysfunctional family. Yeah. According to Gabor Mate, MD, excess stress occurs when the demands made on a child exceed her developmental capacity to fulfill. So the most common drivers of stress on children is a lack of control, a lack of information, and a lack of certainty. So I think that, when we were raised in an environment where there was no control, there was no information, and there was no certainty. So I think what you're trying to do is create an environment where there's certainty and everybody knows what their place is and everybody knows what to do. And it's your job to make sure everyone else is okay. Yeah.
You sent me a TikTok the other day about if you grow up without family support, feeling unsafe, without your parents giving you what you need,
right,
you will frequently want to grow up really fast.
Right.
And you'll just say, well, I'm just going to take care of everything.
Right.
And it really hurt me because that's exactly what I did. I remember in high school fantasizing about what it was going to be like when I was an adult and I had my own place and my own job and I could take care of everything myself. But yes, I think that many of my relationships are still about trying to help other people with things that I can't help them for.
And also taking responsibility for stuff in their lives that are not your responsibility.
Has nothing to do with me. I did have a conflict in my partnership this week where they told me, I need you. Like, I'm trying to be a better person. I'm trying to grow. And I need you to help me with that.
No.
And he finds that insulting or problematic. And I'm like, it can't be my job.
Because I think we have to remember that codependency is baked into our culture, specifically for women, but also, it happens to all of us. I think that you're particularly likely to become codependent if you grow up in these crazy environments. So the thing that I was talking about a second ago. So there's this idea that I have to handle. I remember I had a professor who said, when kids are asked to do things that are above their pay grade, it really creates a lot of problems. And I remember having a client in the past who was cooking the family dinner at 5 years old, and she burned herself on the stove and just, was so upset with herself and so angry. And I said, let's just try this out. Have you seen a 5-year-old lately? Have
you met a 5-year-old?
Should they be cooking on a stove by themselves? Absolutely not. But adult responsibilities as a child, I think it does kind of screw up your whole relationship with other people. Yeah, I did the same thing until I couldn't wait until I moved out of the house and got my own apartment, because I knew then that things would be predictable. I would have dinner on the table the same time every night. I'd pay all my bills. Cause growing up with dad, I remember having to, as a teenage girl, ask my friend's mom to drive me to the city utilities place because they turned our electricity off because dad hadn't paid the bill. And I had to write a check as a child and, take that in. I had to do the family grocery trip as a child. And so I think, when that's where we're coming from, it's really hard to come back from that as grown-ups.
To manage healthy boundaries.
Exactly.
As an adult.
So with all of this, you might be asking yourself, how do I know when I'm being codependent? And also, how do I stop? So how can you tell when you're being codependent?
I think when I do things that cross a boundary, I'm frequently thinking to myself, this person is going to love me for doing this, or I am going to earn, something. Extra Scooby snacks, and you don't. And
so I think that's when you're being codependent. When you're doing something with the goal of trying to get Scooby snacks and you're not, and then you don't get them and you're resentful and you're like, oh, why did I do all that?
My friend Augie Smith grew up in a family of addiction. His father was an alcoholic, active in his addiction, and he told a story for years about a time where he, at 8 or 9 years old, was driving his dad home because his dad was too drunk.
Right.
And he plays the story for laughs. And he talks about being pulled over because guess what? He wasn't doing a great job.
Right.
He
was a child because he was a child.
And he said, I'll never forget the look on the officer's face when he saw who was driving. And he took a long time to realize what a sad story that was.
Yeah.
And that's definitely a big component. Comics frequently get to I've been telling this story as a funny story for years and years. And now that I'm an adult and I see other 8-year-olds and I think, oh God, you should never have been doing that, buddy.
Exactly. That's the difficulty of raising it, because I can see where he is. And I just think, oh my God, when I was your age, I was doing all my own laundry and cooking my own meals and getting myself to school. What? So
your kid is a bad chef. Like this dude.
He's very bad. I tried to teach him to make macaroni and he did not do a good job. He did not do it.
But he's also, for the listener, he is a wild experimenter. Everything is an opportunity to combine things in a way that no one's ever thought of combining them before because they're bad. Like
because it would be because it's gross.
Because it's gross. He will definitely put, Kool-Aid powder into a tortilla, melt cheese on it just to see how it is. It's bad.
Throw a few Takis in there.
But kids, the reason kids don't do adult stuff is that we're not really able to.
Right. So, yes. So going back to Helen Sereni's article, she says, if we grow up in a dysfunctional family system, we realize that adult children is what we become, right? We carry a wounded child and we can only go so far in achieving that potential in our lives. Yeah. So I'm walking around trying to heal the needs of my child self. And sometimes I think that's why we are codependent, because we're thinking, okay, well, this is, if I do this thing the right way, then it'll all. So yes, how do we stop?
So let me mirror this back to you and see if I've gotten it. So what I'm hearing you saying is that when you're a kid, you try to rush into being an adult.
Right.
So that you can take care of your own needs. But then when you're an adult, you are still partially a kid.
You're stuck. Yeah.
You're stuck because you never had those needs met.
And so you're always struggling and your relationships are really messy. I mean, when I look at my history, specifically, not just dating, but also a lot of friendships where I was really overcompensating.
I think where the only thing that I can recognize is when I find myself taking ownership of other people's stuff and trying to overstep the bounds of friendship, relationships, whatever it is. And that is a familiar feeling. There's a certain streak of betrayed martyr feeling that I get.
Absolutely.
That lets me know that whatever I'm doing is not healthy. It's not a reasonable thing.
Right. Boundaries are about saying no to all the roles that have been imposed on us to fit in. Boundaries are just about saying no. No is not merely about changing other people, but admitting the need to change ourselves. It means that we no longer need validation from others to measure our self-worth. Again, we can thank Helen Sereni for that. But I think that's true. Boundaries, someone described it to me once this way. Boundaries are the lines that I draw that keep you safe and keep me safe.
Mm-hmm. That's a good final thought. So this wound up being a super personal episode.
Yeah.
A lot more family lore than I thought we were necessarily going to do, which I hope is interesting at the baseline or familiar to some of our listeners.
What are your takeaways about codependency today?
I think I finally learned what codependency truly is, or what it is in the modern parlance, that it is neither the definition that I carried around with me as a child and teenager, nor is it exclusively for addicts, which I kind of thought for a long time. And a lesson that I keep learning is that when I behave in a codependent way, it's my boundary, just I'm doing it.
I'm responsible.
People are not doing it to me.
Exactly.
Yes, I am responsible for it. But definitely an interesting thing to keep checking in with yourself. What motivates me to do this? I talked to a friend of mine about being too helpful, being he's always going to pick you up at the airport. He's always
right.
I'm this pleaser behavior is not healthy for anyone.
Right.
And that's very hard for him to take on, because I think he also, like me, operates with a lot of self-loathing day to day.
Wonderful.
So pretty great. As a great woman once said, well, that's wonderful. And that person is our other sister. So a lot to chew on, a lot to think about. If you have any thoughts or questions about codependency in relationships and friendships or anything else, Laura, where can people send questions?
They can send questions to hello@mysistersatherapist.com.
And where can people find you in your practice online?
You can find me at lauraryan.org, or you can also follow me on TikTok at I am Laura Ryan. TikTok. And Virginia, where can people find you?
People can find me, my TikTok, my Instagram, my website are all hooked to the word Badinia, BADINIA.com. But thank you so much for joining us. If you're enjoying this conversation between two slightly unhinged sisters, please like and subscribe to My Sister's a Therapist and tell anybody else about it that you think might enjoy it. And thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Have a great day.